When was the last time someone sat across from you and asked, not about your blood pressure, not about your cholesterol, but about what's happening inside your eyes right now? Because there is a process unfolding in the retinal tissue of most people over 60 that is completely silent, completely painless, and almost completely preventable. If you know, for one of my practice, I've reviewed the medication lists and the lab panels and the specialist notes of thousands of older adults. And one thing I've noticed consistently is that no one ever talks to them about their eyes until something has already started to go wrong. The numbers are worth pausing on. Age-related macular degeneration affects an estimated 1 in 8 for adults over 60. By 75, that figure rises to roughly 1 in 3, and in the majority of those cases, a crown. The biological process had been running quietly for years before any diagnosis. The people most at risk right now have no symptoms. That is the nature of this condition, and it is also the reason this conversation matters. By the time a diagnosis lands, the process has been running quietly for years. What I want to walk you through today is what the research tells us about the single most protective dietary intervention for retinal and lens health after 60. Why the timing of when you eat it matters at a biological level most eye health conversations never explain, and the exact protocol that gives your body the best chance to use it correctly. We'll come back to a scenario in a moment, an illustrative case I want you to hear. But first, I need you to understand why what your eyes need after 60 is fundamentally different from what most people think they need. Most seniors I speak with have heard two things about eating for eye health: eat carrots and eat blueberries. Both of those recommendations have real evidence behind them, and both of them are addressing the wrong mechanism for the primary causes of vision loss in adults over 60. I want to explain why, because understanding that gap is what makes the rest of this conversation matter. Carrots are rich in beta-carotene. Beta-carotene is converted to vitamin A in the body, and vitamin A is essential for your health. For the production of rhodopsin, the visual pigment in the rod photoreceptors that enables low-light vision. Vitamin A deficiency causing night blindness is a real problem in nutritionally depleted populations. In the well-nourished adult over 60, it is almost certainly not the primary driver of what's changing in your vision. The mechanisms that actually drive age-related macular degeneration and cataract formation are different. And carrots, for all their genuine nutritional value, don't address them with any real specificity. Blueberries are a more interesting case. The anthocyanin compounds in blueberries have documented effects on retinal blood flow and anti-inflammatory activity in retinal tissue. If you're eating blueberries regularly, the research supports continuing. But the zeaxanthin content of blueberries is low. The anti-glycation mechanism that protects the lens is absent. And the research on blueberries and macular pigment optical density, the direct, measurable marker of retinal carotenoid status that predicts AMD risk, shows modest effects rather than substantial ones. What I'm about to describe addresses 4 separate mechanisms driving vision decline in older adults simultaneously, through a single fruit, eaten at a specific biological moment. And the reason the timing matters, why before bed specifically, is something I'm going to explain in detail after the 4 mechanisms, because it changes how much of this actually reaches your retina. Let me walk you through an illustrative scenario. Let's call her Margaret, 71, retired librarian, someone who had read her entire adult life and was deeply aware of what it would mean to lose that ability. She came to speak with me about something her ophthalmologist had mentioned at her most recent appointment: early-stage age-related macular degeneration. She had been told to monitor it and return in 12 months. No specific guidance about what she could actively do in the meantime. She looked at me and said, "I feel like I'm just waiting. Nobody has told me if there's anything I can actually do right now." What I told Margaret, and what I want to tell you, is that macular pigment density is one of the only modifiable predictors of AMD risk. Unlike kidney filtration rate, macular pigment density can be measurably increased through consistent, targeted dietary practice. And the fruit that makes the most mechanistically specific difference to that measure is not one most people think of when they think about eye health. The fruit is papaya. I want you to stay with me past the name, because your first instinct may be that you already know about papaya. I'd ask you to hold that thought, because what I'm going to describe is not the general antioxidant story. Most people have heard. It's 4 specific biological mechanisms, each one documented in the research literature, each one targeting a different pathway driving of vision loss after 60. The first mechanism is the one the research on AMD risk consistently points to as the most modifiable target: macular pigment density. The macula, the central zone of the retina responsible for fine detail vision, reading, and face recognition, is protected by a layer of yellow pigment composed primarily of carotenoids, lutein, and zeaxanthin. Think of that macular pigment like the tinted visor on protective eyewear. The tint doesn't prevent you from seeing. It filters out the specific wavelengths of light that damage the photoreceptor cells. On protective eyewear. The tint doesn't prevent you from seeing. It filters out the specific wavelengths of light that damage the photoreceptor cells, fading from that visor. The photoreceptors become progressively exposed to the blue spectrum light and oxidative stress that accumulate over decades of daily life. The landmark AREDS 2 trial conducted by the National Eye Institute confirmed that adequate dietary zeaxanthin alongside lutein is associated with meaningful reductions in AMD progression risk and with measurably increased macular pigment optical density when delivered consistently over 8 to 12 weeks. Papaya is among the most concentrated dietary sources of zeaxanthin of any commonly available fruit. And unlike the zeaxanthin in a supplement, the zeaxanthin in whole papaya comes packaged with the fat-soluble matrix that the body needs to actually absorb and deposit it in macular tissue. The second mechanism addresses the lens, and specifically the clear fluid surrounding it. The aqueous humor, the fluid filling the front chamber of the eye, contains vitamin C at concentrations 20 to 30 times higher than in blood plasma. That extraordinary concentration is not accidental. The eye actively transports and accumulates vitamin C there because it is the primary antioxidant defense, protecting the lens epithelial cells from the oxidative damage that initiates cataract formation. Think of the aqueous humor as a protective moat surrounding the lens. Vitamin C is that moat's filtration system, neutralizing oxidative threats before they reach the lens wall. When aqueous humor vitamin C concentration falls, which happens as dietary intake becomes inconsistent, and as age reduces the efficiency of vitamin C transport, that filtration system is underpowered, and the cloudiness of early cataract begins. 1 cup of ripe papaya delivers over 90 milligrams of vitamin C in a bioavailable form that efficiently replenishes aqueous humor concentration. That's not a general benefit. That's a mechanism directly relevant to lens health. I want to make sure you stay with me through the next 2 mechanisms, because the third one is the reason no other fruit commonly discussed for eye health can do what in papaya does. It addresses a process happening inside your lens right now that neither blueberries nor carrots nor any supplement addresses. And after the 4th mechanism, I'm going to explain the detail that most conversations about papaya completely skip. Why before bed specifically, and what happens inside the retina during sleep that makes the timing the difference between this protocol working and not working. That part is coming. Stay with me. The 3rd mechanism is the one that sets papaya apart from every other fruit in this conversation: glycation, the non-enzymatic attachment of glucose molecules to the crystalline proteins that maintain the transparency of the lens. As glucose molecules bond to these proteins over decades of exposure, the proteins lose their precise molecular arrangement, clump together, and produce the progressive clouding that characterizes a cataract. Think of the lens like a perfectly clear glass surface. Glycation is a slow accumulation of residue bonding into the glass itself, not something you can clean. Papain, the proteolytic enzyme unique to papaya, has been shown in research to directly inhibit the glycation of crystalline proteins, reducing the rate at which the glucose protein bonds that initiate cloudiness form. This mechanism exists in no other commonly available fruit. It is one of the most mechanistically specific things a dietary compound can do for lens health, and it is completely absent from blueberries, carrots, tart cherry, or any of the other fruits most commonly discussed for vision protection. The 4th mechanism is retinal inflammation. Chronic low-grade inflammation in retinal tissue drives AMD progression by creating an environment in which photoreceptor degeneration is accelerated beyond what oxidative stress alone produces. Both lycopene and beta-cryptoxanthin, 2 carotenoids present in significant concentrations in deeply orange ripe papaya, have been shown to inhibit inflammatory pathway activation in retinal pigment epithelial cells. Think of retinal inflammation like a slow, sustained heat source beneath the floor of a room wherein your most delicate instruments are kept. The instruments aren't being struck or broken directly. The ambient heat is simply degrading them at a rate that becomes visible only over years, Reducing that inflammatory tone preserves the photoreceptors that were never obviously threatened, but were quietly being damaged all along. A study published in the journal Nutrients documented measurable increases in macular pigment optical density following consistent daily papaya consumption in adults over 60, alongside reductions in retinal inflammatory markers. 4 mechanisms, each one documented, each one targeting a different pathway. But here is what none of them. The research papers spell out clearly for the person actually trying to use this information. The compounds in papaya are fat-soluble. They require specific absorption conditions, and they are most useful to the retina at a very specific window of the 24-hour cycle. Get those, and a significant proportion of what you consume passes through without reaching the tissue that needs it. That's what I wanted to cover now, exactly how to eat this correctly. I know what some of you are thinking right now. I already take a lutein and zeaxanthin supplement. Do I still need the fruit? It's a fair question. And the honest answer is that the researchers on macular carotenoid deposition consistently shows that whole food sources deliver these compounds alongside the fat-soluble matrix, like lycopene and beta-cryptic xanthin, that supplements don't replicate. A supplement gives you 1 or 2 isolated compounds. Ripe papaya gives you the full carotenoid profile, the vitamin C, and the papain, all in a form the body has evolved to absorb together. If you're taking a supplement, the research in geriatric pharmacology consistently suggests the supplement works best as a complement to dietary sources, not a replacement for them. 1 cup of deeply orange ripe papaya, approximately 140 to 150 grams, consumed 6 to 90 minutes before sleep. The bedtime timing is not arbitrary. The retina performs its most intensive repair and renewal during sleep. The disc shedding and photoreceptor regeneration managed by the retinal pigment epithelium occurs predominantly during the overnight period. Consuming the zeaxanthin, vitamin C, and lycopene in papaya 60 to 90 minutes before sleep allows peak absorption to align with the early sleep window when retinal regenerative processes are most active. That's the biological rationale behind the timing, and it's the detail most conversations about papaya never explain. Ripeness is your dosing guide. Deeply orange ripe papaya delivers significantly higher zeaxanthin and beta-cryptic xanthin concentration than pale yellow underripe papaya. The carotenoid content increases as the flesh deepens in color during ripening. If the papaya at your store is pale and firm, leave it at room temperature for 2 to 3 days until it deepens and softens. Don't skip that step. The ripening process is the carotenoid synthesis process. Fat pairing is not optional, it's the absorption mechanism. Zeaxanthin, lycopene, and beta-cryptic xanthin are fat-soluble carotenoids. Without dietary fat present in the gut at the time of consumption, a significant proportion of these compounds passes through unabsorbed. 4 to 5 walnuts alongside the papaya, or half an avocado, or a teaspoon of olive oil. Published research has shown fat co-consumption increases carotenoid bioavailability by 50 to 100% compared to fat-free consumption. Optional but meaningful, a squeeze of fresh lime juice over the papaya adds a second pulse of vitamin C alongside the fruit's own content, and the mild acidity slightly enhances carotenoid bioavailability through its effect on gut pH during absorption. Leave the papaya out of the refrigerator for 30 minutes before consuming it in the evening. Cold food immediately before sleep can mildly stimulate digestive activity and delay the transition into early sleep, the precise window this protocol is designed to utilize. 3 details that determine whether this protocol actually reaches your retina, or is prevented by factors that seem minor but are mechanistically significant. First, color is your dosing guide, always. The depth of orange in the flesh is a direct indicator of zeaxanthin and beta-cryptic xanthin concentration. Pale papaya is nutritionally different from deeply orange papaya. When selecting, choose the deepest color available. If none is at full ripeness, take the fruit home and ripen it at room temperature. Don't refrigerate. During ripening, cold temperatures slow carotenoid synthesis. Second, on days when fresh papaya isn't available, dried goji berries, 1 to 2 tablespoons, rehydrated in warm water for 10 minutes before consumption, paired with a fat source, contain among the highest zeaxanthin concentrations of any food source, on a gram-for-gram basis. Research published in JAMA Ophthalmology documented measurable macular pigment optical density increases in adults who consumed goji berries daily for 90 days. Rotate between papaya and goji berries across the week for consistent zeaxanthin delivery. Third, consider requesting macular pigment optical density testing at your next eye appointment, not just visual acuity. Standard acuity testing measures existing function at a single point in time. It does not measure the status of the protective pigment layer that determines future risk. MPOD testing is available at most ophthalmology practices and many optometry clinics. Establishing a baseline before beginning this protocol, then retesting after 12 weeks of consistent practice, gives you the objective evidence of whether the dietary change is producing the retinal change it's designed to produce. Ask for it specifically. Margaret, the retired librarian I described at the beginning of this conversation, followed this protocol consistently for 12 weeks. 1 cup of deeply orange ripe papaya 60 to 90 minutes before bed every evening, alongside 4 walnuts and a squeeze of lime. At her 12-week ophthalmology follow-up, her macular pigment optical density had increased measurably. Her ophthalmologist, who had told her 18 months earlier to monitor and return, asked her what she had changed. When she described it, he took notes. She told me afterward, the most important thing wasn't the number on the test. It was knowing I was doing something, not just waiting. That's what I want for you. You now know something most people your age don't. You understand the 4 mechanisms driving vision decline after 60. You understand why the timing of this specific fruit matters at a biological level. And you have a protocol you can begin tonight. 1 cup of deeply orange ripe papaya, 4 walnuts, a squeeze of lime, 6 to 90 minutes before sleep. Talk to your eye care provider about a baseline MPOD reading. Discuss whether your current supplements are the right approach for your specific situation. And if you've noticed any recent changes in your vision, difficulty with contrast, reading in lower light, night driving, mention those at your next appointment. That conversation matters. You now have the knowledge to ask better questions.
Yeah.
And that's where everything starts.